Film Fest Gent, and I have the pleasure tonight to talk to two filmmakers from America. I could even say from Palm Springs. They're talking to us from Palm Springs, and they have made an exciting film, House of Cardin, on the French world famous designer Pierre Cardin, and I'm talking to P. David Ebersole and Todd Hughes. Well, welcome, David and Todd. My first question would be, you spent, like, I'm sure, 1 or 2 years of your life on this film. In what way was Pierre Cardin important in your life, and why did you choose finally this subject?
We always kind of say that this subject chose us more than we chose it. We had already been kind of collecting Pierre Cardin design. We love his furniture. We love all of kind of the lifestyle items that he has. I don't think that either of us were really particularly that into the clothing, not that we didn't appreciate it or like it, but it just wasn't our entry point.
And honestly, nothing about the man. We didn't even think about that there was a real person. We just loved this brand.
Yeah.
And our obsession brought us to Paris, where we were looking for, Pierre Cardin had a record label called Les Disques Pierre Cardin. So we were at the Pouce looking for the records. And as we came back to our hotel, we stumbled across the Pierre Cardin Museum, which we had to check out, being huge fans. It was closed, but we went to the store next door, Evolution. It was a boutique. And we were showing the guy who worked there pictures on our iPhone of our house. We had the car that's in the movie. And he said, "Oh, Monsieur Cardin loves to meet people like you." And we were
like, there is
a
Pierre Cardin. You know, at that point also, he was 95 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, certainly because in America, you had heard less about him. He pulled his brand out of America in the 90s. And so, you know, we would have just thought that he had passed away, that the brand, you know, had not continued in a certain way, that there was this museum that was like sort of in tribute to him. But we didn't know that there was an actual real Mr. Cardin who still went to work every day, signs every check.
And
you know, so we started to get kind of fascinated with wanting to meet him. That was really the goal and the plan. It was not to get ourselves engaged into, like you said, a 2-year process of making a film. And so the next time we were in Paris, we followed this guy's instructions about how you might, as a fan, get to kind of meet your design hero, because he still works every day. He goes into his store, his main flagship store, usually on a Tuesday morning, he told us, to go through and make sure that everything is to his liking within the store. So the next time we flew to Paris was a year later, and we went into the store. I made it so that we flew in on a Monday night so that we could go in on a Tuesday morning, and dressed ourselves all up and went in and tried to see if we could say hello and, you know, get a picture for Facebook to impress our friends. And next thing we knew, one thing led to another, and we were sitting down and having lunch with him, and he was asking us basically if we were there wanting to do a documentary on him.
now, only at that point did we Google the man, and then we discovered that we had hit the jackpot, because he's just got such an incredible story. I mean, we would have been there from the get-go had you said Dior, Beauty and the Beast, diversifying the runway, right? You're already talking our language. So he really turned out to be a gold mine for us of interest, and also just such a nice person.
And I'm sure that you discovered many things about him that weren't that well known or that people forgot. For example, in the film, you see that he discovered Gérard Depardieu. That's quite a thing, you know, that the way Gaultier started his career with him. So it's somebody who crossed the lives of a lot of people.
Well, even Sharon Stone, how interesting that he picked her out when she was not famous.
19 years old.
And said, you're somebody, like he did with Gérard Depardieu, as he did with Gaultier and Philippe Starck, as he did with us. And, you know, as you talk to people in the House of Cardin, we all have a similar story. You meet him, he looks in your eyes, he doesn't vet you, he looks at you, he touches you, and he goes, "This one's good." Upstairs.
And once you started when you wanted to make the film, how did you go about the structure and what would you put in the film, what not? Because I can imagine that you could kind of make 10 different films out of Pierre Cardin, because it's such a rich career and creativity.
We always say we could just do Pierre Cardin in China and just make that one movie. We did decide that we wanted to do a retrospective. We wanted to make the movie about everything. So we didn't really want to do something that was like a slim period of time. He has a 70-year career and it's remarkable from start to finish. So
one thing we did impose upon ourselves, the first cut was 3 hours. You could do a 6-hour miniseries about his career. We said we cannot go beyond his age in minutes. So at the time he was 97, and we said we have to fit it in 97 minutes, because what you love about Pierre is also what people don't like about him, is that he doesn't stop, right? It just keeps going and going and going.
Yeah.
So it was a really interesting process. I would say it's the most sculpture-like of any film we've done, where we had so much archival, we had so much to work with, and we just kept putting stuff here, taking it off, putting it down there, deciding what to include, what not to include. And a big revelation was when we realized we couldn't catalog everything he did. That's for a museum show or a book. We decided, let's just spend time with Pierre Cardin and find out who this man is.
And try to get a feeling for him, through seeing him today, but also sort of seeing all of the things that he has said over time and through his career. The one thing that happened for us with structure on this film is that we also realized how impossible it would be to try to do something chronological. It was just too scattered. And so we instead structured into concepts and ideas. So we did fashion, design, globalism, personal life, etc. So we kind of put it out into blocks like that for ourselves. And then it really helped us to know, this goes with that goes with this. And we could start kind of shaping his, his life into something palatable. It was just so vast.
You say you made a film about the work, but also about who is Pierre Cardin. Some people still say that at the end you don't really know that much about him, that there is still like a hidden, that is very discreet on some things in his life.
What I love too is that Vogue did a brilliant article on it. A lot of people are getting to know him very well because you spend so much time with him from when he's 20 to when he's 90. And he's talking to you and you see his body language. You see he's a bit of a, he's not full of himself, but he certainly is proud of himself. He is very secretive, but he's also very emotional, and he's very, I think what was so surprising is that this man is a genius, and that genius is so simple. It's common sense. It's just cutting to the quick. The ability to see something and not go on and on and on, but to just know and it's done and then move on. So it's interesting because when people leave the film saying they still don't know him, you kind of have to wonder, well, what do you want to know?
What do you want
to know?
Like, what is it? Like when we think about, like, people say, they dabble in his personal life, but they don't go deeply into it. We're sort of like, well, like, what do you want to know? Like, what positions he does in bed? We're sort of like, what's the
how far you have to go to know someone, or...
Right? Because what we do is cover the two great loves of his life and talk about the people that mattered to him in that way. We're not defensive about it. We're actually sort of, curious. Like, what is it that is being held back, that somebody would say, he still is an enigma? Because part of, I think, what we experienced getting to know him was that he's kind of wussywug. He is what you see is what you get. He's not, there's no secret. He's not hiding anything. So,
sorry.
No, so I was just saying, so he is who he is.
You talk about the two loves in his life, then you mean Jeanne Moreau and André Olivier?
Exactly.
Well, one is very famous, the other is less famous now. But was he in any way, because as you had to work with him and that this film was made with his collaboration in his scene, were the things that you had to be careful of, were the things that he objected, or did he give you complete freedom?
He gave us complete freedom. And then, we just had to, like him, use good judgment about that he is French, that the French approach to homosexuality is very different than the American. So, you had to, and we were very scared when he saw the film for the first time, because he didn't definitively tell us what happened. We kind of had to do our best piecing it together, and luckily he is talking to us.
And he felt like it was respectful and that it was true. And, like I say, and like I think that Jean-Paul Gaultier says in the film, he was never closeted. It's not like he was not living his life and being himself, but he didn't necessarily feel like he needed to put a banner out for everybody, or, carry the gay pride flag to be that individual for others. So, his privacy, is just sort of natural. It's not like particularly aggressive. It's not like he would say to us, you may not ask me about certain things. But if we asked about Jean Moreau, he said that was a very private relationship and I prefer to keep it that way. So then he would reveal a little bit more, or give you another answer, or you could find answers in other press where he has talked about it and begin to kind of piece it together. And he never said to us, please don't do that.
Also, in choosing us, we kind of felt he was saying, it's time for me to come out, right? Because he knew we were gay and we were gonna talk
at least
about
address it. Yeah.
And when you mentioned that there's a great difference between how the French deal with homosexuality and gayness than the Americans, what do you mean? That it's more open in America, or?
Yes, I think that in French culture, it's still very much, you don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is surprising in our times, I think.
Yes, especially in Europe, you'd think they'd be much more progressive. But,
But remember, he's also 98 years old.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, he comes from a generation where they did what they did, and they had great lives, very creative, fantastic, amazing lives. With, as he says, he's had, a great love life. It's not like he was tortured and didn't get to be who he wanted to be. So they just lived differently, and they lived differently in that way about the announcement and pronouncement of who you are. Just compare him to Jean-Paul Gaultier. I mean, Jean-Paul Gaultier is this loud, out, proud human being, and he does carry that banner, and we get to have him as that kind of hero for ourselves. It just was different.
I had the impression that as a person that he changed, of course, a lot during his very long life. I mean, you see the images of him, the interviews when he is like in his 30s, 40s, he has a certain arrogance. He has a lot of, I think, charisma and charm, but it has kind of a typical, if I may say, French arrogance. But when you see now, the old man is very modest and is very, very vulnerable. So it's a great, you see like somebody aging in the film.
And it's interesting because when you do watch him, when he's very young, he's kind of naive, and then he becomes kind of arrogant when he's very successful. Not in an awful way, but
no.
But like you said, and he won't look at the camera. And then as he matures, he starts to look at the camera.
And yet he says so much more when he's young than when he's older. Like when he's older, he says very pithy single sentences sometimes, his answers. And when he's young, he's willing to blah, 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 right? And really kind of, pontificate.
And we were so lucky that we had all that archival footage just to find those little lines that I think give you a real insight into his genius and character, like, what do you do about people who don't like you? And he says, you don't have to like me. I prefer to like other people, right? How simple, how beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful.
And at the end, when he says, "I'm not here to impose, I'm here to propose," right?
Yeah, it's interesting too to see him interact with young people also in the film. How this man of this age is still curious and still really wants to meet younger people.
And that was true working with him. I've never worked with, I mean, this man is a legend, and we would show up with our French crew, and he wanted to meet every single person and find out what they did, what their interests were. And everyone was so charmed by him. It was just very easy to work with him.
So you have no bad experience at all during this film. It was all...
He said beforehand, "I need to be 100% or I won't be on camera." So we would come to France and we'd hire a crew and he'd say, "Not today." And we'd go, "Okay." But when he did show up, he gave it 100%. So,
well, you know, there was one time when we had a plan to shoot in his car, and he was going to go through a lot of photographs in his back seat as he drove to Houdan, where he is building the final Espace Cardin. And there was a surprise. Somebody showed up that we weren't expecting. He wanted to be alone with that person in his car. And so he just canceled and told us, like, meet you in Houdan. So there's a certain part of him that is, you know, used to being the boss. He knows he runs the show. And you have to kind of fall into it and find your place inside of it. You know, we could make that movie, like we could have done the sort of reality TV version of showing what it's like to try to run around and follow Mr. Cardin. But I mean, I don't know how interesting that is, but there was that side to things, which is that we always say he's so kind, he's so generous, but like somebody like Cher, who we worked with as well, they are the diva, they are the boss, and everybody around them falls in, and you can just see it. You can just see the way that people relate to him.
You know, we were quite smitten with him too. So
yeah, that's understandable. I want to ask you something, which is a relationship maybe I see between you, both of you, and Cardin. He is a person who created everything. He created the costumes, he created the environment, and everything was like a show, or everything was like also a kind of performance. And I find it a little bit, without knowing you very well, in you both too. You know, the way you are dressed, the way I see the pictures of your house in Palm Springs, and the way you introduce films. You have also that kind of performance thing in you. Is that something that grew naturally, or did you cultivate that?
We're aware of the Ebersole Hughes brand.
We're promosexuals, you know.
and we're aware that we have to present, and I think that we're aware, like Mr. Cardin, of the separation between public and private. That there is something that you put out for people because you are to some extent in the public eye. I mean, our version of it is this big compared to his version of it. But I think that that's something that you learn being in the film business in a way, because in now 25 plus years of a career, you have to present often, and you learn sort of what feels comfortable for you about doing it. I think that there's Sharon Stone, it's not in the movie, but she was talking about it because we talked to her about that man versus the brand idea. And she said at her house, she has a closet full of clothes that she calls the Sharon Stone closet, because she has to go in there and become Sharon Stone. And she said she often feels like when, you know, she goes out into public, people relate to her as Sharon Stone, not as Sharon or Cher or all the different nicknames that she said that her good friends will call her. And so you feel a real separation between the character and the person, and yet it's all kind of one and the same at the same time. And we certainly have Ebersole Hughes clothes.
Although, interestingly enough, Pierre would never let us comb his hair.
Mine's easy to comb.
Yeah. How you made this film? Now you will probably travel a lot with this film at festivals. Have you decided your next film already? Because I remember when you were in Ghent for your previous film, you were already working on this one.
Yeah.
Well, that was when we were in Ghent, we had just met him, and we actually took the train to Paris one day to get the sign off.
Oh,
from
yeah,
him.
yeah.
And so we were
got the
riding
deal
home.
memo signed, and we took a train and came back to you. Right? We went back,
That was
so we are
so
part of the festival, as part of the history of the film.
It was, and we met through you, Alexandra Philippe,
Mm.
who was there with the Psycho movie,
Yeah.
and we all went to see Chess, and we were there when he met William Friedkin.
Mm.
So it was it was a good year for documentarians to be.
Yeah, because he's gone on to make a film about William Friedkin after that, which was great. I love that film. And yes, we do have another movie. It's completely in the can and at final editing stages. You know, the Sundance deadline is Friday, and so we're sort of madly editing away. We thank you for getting us up early today so that we can get ourselves in there and keep going. It's about Trini Lopez, the singer Trini Lopez.
Yeah, who recently died. Yeah.
COVID. And we were supposed to show him the rough cut on August 1st. And that's the day that he went into the hospital and was dead 10 days later. So we never got to show him kind of, you know, the finished version of the movie, or like getting towards, you know, completion version of the film. So we're very excited that we actually have this great, you know, record of his legacy sitting in our computer. And we can try to now get it out there. So we're trying to finish before the end of the year.
Initially, we were trying to get it out before the election next month, because Trini is the son of illegal Mexican immigrants. He was born in Dallas, Texas, and fought his way out of the ghetto with a guitar and went on to become a member of the Rat Pack. He was an American institution. So a very American story. He was also the first Latino not to anglicize his name. Previously, his friend Richard Valenzuela became Richie Valens. And when he got his record contract, they wanted him to change Lopez, and he refused. But many Latino artists now recognize him as the man who made a Latin name a marquee name.
And we call the film My Name is Lopez.
So I suppose the film will finally show to a lot of people who didn't know him, who are too young to have known him, that he is more than If I Had a Hammer. That was more about him, that song.
So it's funny career-wise, though,
It's
yeah.
You mentioned there's so many things in it, and the music is fantastic in the movie. It's really fun.
I'm looking forward to see it. You mentioned the election. How do you look to the election day? What will you do except voting? Will you?
We are staying 100% positive that we will win, and that this country is tired of the nonsense. But this is a big country, and we've realized we're pretty split down the middle. We didn't think we were, but I think we are.
Yeah, we tried to watch the debate last night, and I have to say, Donald Trump is just impossible to watch. It's such a train wreck. It's so miserable, and it's such an ugly version of, you know, anything that this country is supposed to be about. So it just, like, at a certain point, we've just decided, you know, we can't even respond to or look at him anymore, and we just need to figure out how to get past it. So hopefully November will put a big marker in the calendar and put an end to what has just become a terrible moment in our history, I think.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's funny. There's a line in the film that Dionne Warwick says that had less resonance than it does now when she said it. But she says, you know, I didn't like what my country was doing to people who looked like me. And then she follows it up with, and I still don't. And at the time that she said it, it wasn't quite as powerful. But now that Black Lives Matter has stepped forward so strongly, now that we're seeing the systemic racism, be mirrored back at us so fiercely, that statement from her, I think, resonates really strongly. We're in love with her. She was one of our favorite interviews to have done, and it does politicize even Mr. Cardin's life a bit when you think about the idea that he made those steps towards diversifying the runway, and that it was important to change, to democratize, self-expression. I mean, that's really what we're talking about when we talk about fashion, is the ability to put yourself out there, to say who you are. And that was something that was only for rich women, is certainly transformed and changed over our time.
It was actually great for me too to see, for a lot of people, I suppose, to see Dionne Warwick again, because he's kind of a little bit disappeared. And next day I put a CD on of her greatest hits by Burt Bacharach, because it's a great singer, I think.
Yeah, she's a fantastic person, and we've interviewed a lot of people in our time, and she was the one that made my knees weak when she walked into the room with those cheekbones rising to the air and that voice coming out of her, and it was just like, oh my God, it's Dionne Warwick.
But also,
and it took me a minute to sort of get my sea legs back.
Loving Pierre Cardin, you do join a cult. And it's so funny when you're with someone who's also a legend, and we're talking about Pierre like, oh yeah, I love it when he does that. Oh, did you go out to dinner at midnight? Oh yeah, he loves. So you were bonding over how nice he is, and you realize this guy's for real, right? He's treating everyone with the same respect and enthusiasm.
Okay, thank you for this talk. I was very happy to talk to you again. We have met a couple of times since in Cannes. I remember running into each other. You were always busy working. When I see you were always working, you're always. So it's great to see your energy and your enthusiasm.